Ghibli broke all records with Princess Mononoke, a film that only got sunk several months later by Titanic. It was a massive success, but also one that was a nightmare for the staff. One that left the studio without one of its most vital members, Yoshifumi Kondo, who passed away just afterwards. Not only was he a possible successor, he was one of their best animators and trained a whole generation of the studio. Where do you go from here? There are rumours on the horizon that Miyazaki may be retiring. That is until...
Since I've never announced my retirement, I have no way of rescinding it. I am always hoping I can retire. It is clear that it's too much for me to go on working the same way I have. What I have said is it was the end of my directing as an animator.
After several failed pitches, we land on Spirited Away, a new story for a new generation. And this was a turning point for this whole studio. You've got new avenues, you've got new buildings, and Disney deal, which is funding, in part, some projects going forward, despite the US opening for Mononoke not being so great. But it makes me ask a question. Are all the problems from Princess Mononoke's production going to continue forward? Can Studio Ghibli handle that? And we'll probably get back to that later. Let's start with the biggest change for Spirited Away. It is 100% digital production, something they had tried prior, but now they were creating a new pipeline going forward, and it also brought an unprecedented speed to everything accomplished, as departments were further able to connect. But that's not all. We also include the new partner, Dr. Movie, a Korean studio who assists on all these new digital aspects. But what does radical change look like on the ground? Well, in this situation, one of the biggest problems the studio has faced is recruitment. It's really hard to get people on board when they know how strict the studio is. So why not promote a bunch of younger staff members? You can see that half the crew are either new to the studio or freshly promoted in the last year or so, like future director Yonebayashi. And there's a push for outside talent from Masashi Ando, the animation director. He is set up as the new hand of Miyazaki. He has deferred tons of responsibility, as Miyazaki this time is only supposed to handle the timing of each of the sheets and not the corrections. Ando wanted Chihiro to be a new type of Miyazaki heroine. In particular, he wanted to show her thinking, her uncertainty, hesitation before she does something that's frightening or difficult. And you can kind of see that reflect in the choices of animators he picked, as they were not the conventional staff. As Ando once said in the Roman album, "We must break Ghibli." So there's a real selection of unique animators, especially people like Shinya Ohira, one of the finest animators of a generation, and like Yoshinori Kaneda, who had just left the studio prior, he fills a power vacuum for idiosyncratic outside animators. I see that with his layouts here, which are so radically different in vision, and they're not dissimilar to Kaneda in his approach because he draws keys in betweens and does the timing himself. There's an emphasis on the slower motions and that cloth and the figures of atmosphere, and it moves away from the more big, overt actions Miyazaki is drawn to. His Chihiro here is sour and unsure, tries to capture that real 10-year-old girl element, which is also present in different cuts. Despite the magical environment, there is always an attempt to keep that connected to the emotions of the characters, a reality beyond the dream, you could say. And that reminds me of something you might have seen in one of the earlier Beauty and the Beast films, where they talk about how magic is not logical, it runs off almost the logic of a child, and I think that Miyazaki is resonating with that.
When I made Castle in the Sky, some people said they didn't get what the Leatherstone really was, but it was just magic. And I believe if people can't accept that, it represents an example of weakening of the imaginative spirit. I personally believe fantasy is necessary.
It is a smaller journey that focuses on character growth over giant battles, despite also having powerful witch business owners. Atsuko Tanaka of Telecom Animation came to do several uninterrupted long cuts, with about 70 to her name, working directly on the detailed, expressive nature of Yubaba. She said it was one of the most interesting characters she'd worked with, even if it was a difficult process, and she absolutely kills it, giving the witch a menacing aura and improving on top of the layouts and adding a lot of her own personality in that animation.
My baby! No!
There is a contrast in the way Miyazaki works and what informs his animation, which is usually comes from personal experience. Using reference for his animation, which is helped by his near photographic memory, as he doesn't look directly at the video, he likes to have a personal connection or experience to what he's trying to animate, having some form of reference in real life though, not in video. He wants to understand it beyond the pixels on screen. But then next to that, you also have this bank of cartoony energy that comes in a lot of his characters. Despite Yubaba being very articulate and emotive, she also shoots Dragon Ball style energy beams. And that personal philosophy of Miyazaki could give some trouble to the staff who sometimes didn't understand where it was coming from, because there is an unwillingness there to get past his own view. Ghibli's prior movie broke into chaos as there was no structure to this new wild digital approach, but with Spirited Away they started to get a hang of it, became more confident at attaching all the different departments in a smooth pipeline. And that involved stuff like being a bit more comfortable with CGI, but with a different philosophy, always kind of more flavour to the background. There are very few shots that actually use it predominantly in the focus. But that also has to do with compositing, and we talked about that in the last video about Princess Mononoke. It's a kind of stacking process. You put layer upon layer upon layer. When it's digital, you can put as many on top of each other as you want. When it's traditional, you got 3 or 4 before that's probably going to become unviable. But here, they really took it to the next level. We're talking maybe 30 layers on top of each other now, which is a bit of madness, because then you realize with the rest of the team, oh, this is actually making each shot way more complicated and harder to render and figure out than maybe it should be. Because sometimes limits are a good thing, but that comes back to the key problem at hand. You see, yes, you can iron out the wrinkles with these new digital technologies to make things faster. How they even got one of the companies to make a new tech that allows them to take the digital colors off the screen and printing them as a cell without the colors being off. This was something that was a struggle for the entire industry, and why in the prior film every CG shot was just digital the whole way through, because it was too hard to match the two different things. Because they really didn't have any time, because unfortunately, no matter how many incremental digital techniques you got here, it's not enough to change the structural issues that cause another round of crunch for the staff, because the studio fundamentally hasn't changed. Even if Miyazaki knew about all these complications that would come from this process, he didn't seem to help himself, where Miyazaki's go-to is to improv through the boards and the story and kind of figure it out by the end. He'll start animation as soon as he's got enough boards to do that, which creates that constant relay race. It goes from between boards to corrections to direction, and he's got to balance all of those, which doesn't help with the progress of any of those tasks. By May 2000, any lead they had previous was gone, and they're starting to fall behind. And then June's where the real struggle begins as the workforce becomes thinner. By that point, Ando brought in another 2 supervisors, Kitara Kosoka and Megumi Kagawa. The position was just too much pressure for an individual, and as the months kept moving, it only got worse. After a year of the production, only 10% of it was complete. Now, are they really that slow? Well, I think there's multiple things going on here. One, the expansion of Ghibli means that crew members are basically being pulled away to do things like shorts for the museum, or even maybe TV shows. So there's less people on it, as well as the experimental nature of all this new technology is creating a sort of trial and error process as we get to the layouts, as well as some other difficult factors, including Miyazaki almost creating a 3-hour movie. Now, the fiery passion that Miyazaki brought to the original story ultimately came to be rejected by people like the animation director Ando, who thought it was unfeasible. So what happens is many boards are just cut from the film, including basically an entire 20-minute moving sequence what was supposed to be at the beginning of the film. Surprisingly, it was actually Suzuki who said, yeah, we could push back the deadline for another year if you really wanted to, but Miyazaki thinks this is a trap, because he knows in the end of the day that when it comes to this production stuff, It's a business.
It's because we have a budget. This is not a happy-go-lucky kind of business where we can spend as much money as we want. And besides, film production gets exhausting if it goes for too long. We need to insert a period, bring things to a stop. Of course, we keep saying things like, if we only had another 2 more months, we'd end it with such and such point. But towards the end, we start saying things like, only 1 more month.
What comes with that factor is debt. Now, when Studio Ghibli was created, alleged to Suzuki himself, they were kind of bamboozled by Takuma Shoten, who were the parent company. And at this point, they have now fused with Takuma Shoten after the Disney deal, which means they are also laboured with the debt of the long-term studio, which has left them to have this pressure on themselves to continuously make content, make hits. Now, another reason that Miyazaki may not want to take the extra year is it seems to be something to do with how he has to work to make himself work, needing a kind of backwards pressure to force him forwards. If they did get another year on the production or perish the thought during pre-production, finish the storyboards beforehand, it may just completely untangle and unwind further without that force to edit it down. It is only through outsourcing that Ghibli is once again able to finish this on time, as Doctor Movie takes on more and more to save the production, along with 20 outsourced animation studios likely doing cleanup and other in-between work, which makes that a little bit better than perhaps the nightmare that Mononoke is, on top of some changes in the production pipeline. Studio Ghibli as a building has about 150 people in it, but there can be maybe potentially another 400 outside the company who get this stuff done. And Studio Ghibli had also created Building 3, where they'd be able to go right into audio production straight away and record all the voice work to cut down things on delay in timing. And wouldn't you know, somehow it became the biggest animated movie from Japan of all time for 2 decades. Crazy. Basically making 100-fold what they were a decade ago.
Okay everyone, let's just take a small break. We're at the midpoint right now, and I want to tell you a story about that little goblin known as Miyazaki. Something maybe almost like a fairy tale about what happened during this production. Now this is a real story, by the way, that happened in the production diary. So, during a specific day in the production, old Miyazaki was feeling a little bit hungry. He goes to the kitchen and he sees a nice fresh loaf of bread there that's on the side. And he gets curious, so he asks the staff, "Oh, whose is this? Can I have it?" And he finds out that it was production assistant Saito's. But there's just something in him, he couldn't stop thinking about it. And in the end, Miyazaki ate that loaf completely. While feeling a little bad, he left a couple yen on the table for Saito. But no matter how much he was consoled by his other staff members, "Hey, you saved a bit of money here," it didn't matter, he was devastated. Sometimes you just really need to eat. But fuck that shit, because I'll take the money every time. My patrons can take my bread loaf anytime, as long as they keep paying me. Because with their support, we make this series. It's all me. I'm doing the animation, I'm doing the editing, I'm doing the voicing, and I'm writing it. So it's them that keeps this production going. So I need to thank everyone involved with just keeping it up. Akiyuki Suzuki, Cell Swords, Karen, Lenny, Tim James Richards, Stratogen, Stratos, Steven's mum, Joven, Chunks, Oti, Paul, Ashkarao, Daniel Strait, Subsofa, Fox Mulder, Systematic, everyone that helps means the world for me. And make sure we keep going.
And yet it was very influential. It won all these kind of awards and over time has risen to become one of Japan's favourite Ghibli movies. Some of the biggest ratings on its TV debut. It set up that Mononoke was no fluke. It removed itself completely from any niche category, as the Miyazaki brand becomes a powerhouse in Japan, but starting to look a little bit more feasible internationally. Especially with the Oscar win. That's a differentiation tactic. This is an XYC. This is an award-winning artist with prestige. He won the Oscar and the Golden Bear, and no other Japanese animator's done that before. It's not dissimilar to Suzuki, who also tries to make that standout distinction between other animation and Studio Ghibli. And previously, the Golden Bear hasn't even had animation nominees, so for it to win is a huge shock. Once more, if it was Suzuki or not, Ghibli build on this legacy even further with an infamous quote.
The reason I wasn't here for the Academy Award was because I didn't want to visit a country that was bombing Iraq. At the time, my producer had shut me up and did not allow me to say that, but I don't see him around today.
Alright, it may look a bit like Miyazaki's being a bullshit artist, and to some degree he is, but I'm sure that principally he did not want to go because of the anti-war stuff, but Stephen Albert states in his book that Miyazaki had already made his mind up before the Iraq War even began. He decided he just didn't want to go, and that generally came from a sentiment that he doesn't really like award shows. And even when it came to the Golden Bear, which was beforehand, while he did go to Germany for a little bit out of respect, he did not stay for the award or accept it himself. Generally, Japan had a quite anti-war stance during this period, and in fact, Takuma Shoten had to sort of make up reasons for why any Ghibli staff could go to the Oscars to not cause a scandal, effectively. You know, saying it's about their Disney ties and they were forcing them to. And yeah, you can see the allusions Miyazaki makes even during the time here with his statement on winning the Oscar, but it doesn't discard the fact that he just really didn't want to go. Give him a better reason though. As marketable as Spirited Away may look, it certainly relates more to Disney's own sensibilities than, say, Princess Mononoke did. It was still considered too niche by the heads of Disney, who got a little bit of cold feet. Best-selling Japanese movie ever? Nah, it could have been the best-selling movie in the whole of Asia and it wouldn't have mattered. It's not until after the Oscar victory that Disney was able to push a little bit harder, and that also came with the help of a new disgraced producer, John Lasseter. Miramax and Weinstein were a nightmare to deal with, and they may have also sabotaged Mononoke's chances because they didn't buck to what he wanted to do. In comparison, John did push the project and was given the power after the award to have a bit of a bigger debut. They made $10 million in the US, and Ghibli even made a whole home video in response to thank him for promoting Spirited Away, which I don't think is in circulation anymore, but you know, thought that counts. It's easy to overstate Disney's role. Say, for example, a Disney film usually gets 3,000 theatres, where Spirited Away peaked at about 700 and something, which is not much in comparison. And even when you look at something like Pokemon 2000 still absolutely destroys Spirited Away in the box office revenue. What was invaluable about Disney is more of the contract itself and how many territories they had, and they could use it almost as like a slow burn takeover of those regions. You can see that definitely in France, because their box office comes in number 4, just behind the US. It definitely furthers Miyazaki's international takeover. The studio's constant mythologizing is taking priority over the long-term health of its staff and perhaps the future of the studio. From January onwards, they needed 60 cuts a week after all, which meant they would have had to work overnight. There's no weekends anymore, and you basically had to go until you were ragged once again and the film was finished. Some even seemed jealous of the staff that went to Korea, because they looked rejuvenated when they came back.
We fell way behind on our production schedule, and at one point things were so chaotic and we were so overstretched that we weren't even sure we could make our deadline, yet we did. And despite looking around at the exhausted staff, I found myself secretly thinking over and over, we made it.
There's not to mention the Japanese ad campaign for Spirited Away was massive. You got Nestle Japan attaching free gifts relating to the characters and their popular products. There was advanced tickets that were available at Lawson's. You also had Toho, the distributor, running so many ads in the newspapers about 6 months before the movie came out. It would be fair to say that most people in Japan were aware that this was happening. It's kind of ironic then that they take such a strong anti-capitalist statement within the film when in itself was advertised incredibly robustly, and maybe it's one of the biggest advertising campaigns Japan had ever seen, could make it sound a little less authentic and feel like it's just as culpable as things it's critiquing, such as the world of being in a capitalist product to begin with. This does seem to go against the values that the studio was created for, and no matter if you add all those days off and holidays and other minor adjustments to the system, if you're willing to throw it all away just as soon as things get difficult, it just doesn't matter, as they plaster over it with that Ghibli magic and avoid the hard questions of burnout and crunch. Let's not worry about the uglier side of it, let's just talk about auteurism, right? Let's just talk about the epicness that is Miyazaki. And it seems Disney takes a pamphlet out of Suzuki's book and does the same. In their making of, they only talk about Miyazaki. They don't even use the word Ghibli. And it kind of reminded me something almost reflective that like 6 years ago when I made my first big Miyazaki video, and you know, never seems to die, it can't be beat apparently, I used this video almost as the beginning of the argument for that video and how I framed it in terms of auteur versus collective. But it's complete bollocks. It's just completely a constructed narrative, and it shows the power of advertising and how you can take it easily at face value just by thinking, well, yeah, I guess that makes perfect sense. These are the people who worked on it, or helped make it, or know stuff about it. Obviously, they know what they're talking about. Maybe we shouldn't always trust people like that, huh? well, that's just the power of branding, right? It doesn't matter if it erases people like Ando, who were very much involved, to push Miyazaki onto a pedestal, because they are introducing him to a new generation of children.
In America, animation is the product of many different minds. Let's see, we got the writer who writes, the director who directs, the artist who draws. Well, in Miyazaki's case, he does it all.
監督の安藤さんへの喋り方は命令口調でも先輩の口調でもありません。相手の才能を信じ、対等な立場で相談していました。
But both of them are forms of press. Nippon TV has its own goals to push when it comes to the studio, and Ando was definitely a huge factor in the production, at least at first. As soon as the second half begins, we're basically completely changing the ethos of the picture. A seesaw process happened as Miyazaki was taking over the vision and the style of the movie. As soon as Kitaro Kosaka animates that run across the pipe, it was all over. The focus and approach was moving back to Miyazaki's old ways. Some staff even described that as one eating the other. And that left Ando frustrated with his distance from the final product. He didn't feel like he was able to give those animators he promised the opportunity to do the best they could. And after this production, because of creative reasons, he effectively leaves Ghibli to go on his own path. Now, it's easy to say that was Miyazaki's fault, but Ando has always talked very well of him. He's always felt very fortunate, and he's left a big inspiration on his work going forward. In an interview with Ishiyama Laboratory, he states that the reason he left is that he didn't think he could progress any further if he stayed. He'd always be limited to that second ring. But I guess you're losing talent left and right because they don't have the creative independence or responsibility that maybe they would prefer. Though it seems Miyazaki just can't help himself. He can't help get past that ego of his. It needs to be in his creative comfort area.
You're very modest. I tell them you're all wrong and I'm right.
Well, in your case, you are right.
But you reap what you sow, and next time we're going to see how that all comes together and all these problems come together as we continue onwards into Howl's Moving Castle, as the whole thing may completely collapse the schedule.